Play of the day coming up. We've got bowl games coming up starting at noon today. It's, of course, the ReliaQuest Bowl, Mississippi State and Illinois. Citrus Bowl, LSU and Purdue. The Cotton Bowl, USC Tulane.
Ooh, saucy.
Also, the Rose Bowl. It's the granddaddy of them all. It'll be Utah versus Penn State. Andy Staples covers college football for The Athletic, host of the Andy Staples Show podcast. He was on site at the Peach Bowl between Georgia and Ohio State on Saturday night, and he joins us now. What was your expectation over the weekend with these two games?
I expected Georgia and Michigan to cover comfortably and was wrong on both counts.
Biggest surprise, was it what Ohio State did to Georgia's defense or what TCU did to Michigan?
I think it's what TCU did to Michigan because Ohio State and Georgia athletically are fairly evenly matched. So we'd seen Georgia had the potential to get beat deep a few times, and we knew Ohio State had some of the best receivers in the country and probably the best receiver in the country in Marvin Harrison Jr. So that wasn't as shocking. But TCU just physically completely toe-to-toe with Michigan. Didn't look like there was any issue at all. And it shows us we got to kind of reevaluate how we look at talent and all that. They do play the games for a reason. And you've got kind of a new dynamic with the transfer portal. TCU had, I believe, 13 transfers who played this year. So their talent dynamic changed considerably over the year. And Sonny Dykes just did an incredible job taking over a roster that Gary Patterson did a good job stocking in the first place, but then taking it to another level.
How surprised are you that Georgia's favored by 13.5?
I'm not surprised at all. That's what I would expect. But I would say maybe knock that down a few points based on what we saw this weekend. I think, the Vegas power rankings don't change as quickly as our minds might in this situation. But I'd say maybe knock that down because I think you looked at the speed that TCU had, you look at the explosiveness that TCU had offensively, and you say, okay, they can probably hit some plays on Georgia too.
Who had a worse coaching night of the Big Ten coaches, Harbaugh or Ryan Day?
I think Harbaugh, because you're getting cute with the Philly special early on when you should just be handing it off. Of course, they try to just hand it off and fumble. Although I thought they got screwed on the taking the touchdown off the board. But for me, the Harbaugh thing that just made me kind of yell at the screen was, when you are trying to come back, why are you bleeding that play clock so much? I mean, no sense of urgency whatsoever. And you can use tempo. Like, it's okay to use tempo in the midst of a game when you're not necessarily in your 2-minute offense. And I just didn't understand that because they were doing so well. They were gassing TCU's defense because they were making explosive plays. Just go score and then try to get a stop.
Do you think Ohio State fans were rooting for Michigan to win?
No, because I think Ohio State fans, before that Georgia game started, were very pessimistic about their team's chances against Georgia. So they didn't want to see Michigan win because if Michigan won, then there's a chance Michigan wins the national title. Now, I was feeling very bad for Michigan fans when it looked like Ohio State was going to beat Georgia, because if you beat Ohio State on the field and then Ohio State goes on to win the national title, that's just a crushing moment. And we've seen it before. I mean, Auburn beat Alabama in 2017, and then Alabama went on to win the national title. But in that particular rivalry, in the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, especially given the dynamics of it the past 20 years, that would have been just brutal.
I thought Kirby Smart had some really interesting observations after the game where he was talking about Stetson Bennett, basically saying, you better play better against TCU.
Yeah, I mean, he threw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns against Ohio State. He played okay. Now, there were some throws that he definitely liked back. There was a pull on a read option that if he handed off, it's probably a touchdown. So, yeah, he made some mistakes. But it's funny because that's just how the dynamic between those two guys works. And I don't think you're going to have to convince Stetson Bennett to lock in on this game, but that's just how they go. And what a story this would be to go from walk-on quarterback to potentially 2-time national champion quarterback. And I think what this has shown, this entire season has shown you Stetson Bennett is not just a great story, though. He's a great college quarterback. And I do think he has a pro future. Now, do I think he's going to be a a 10-year starter in the NFL? No, but could he be on that Chase Daniel plan? Abso-freaking-lutely. He belongs in that league.
But I wonder how history is going to treat Stetson Bennett. Let's say he wins back-to-back national championships. What do you think?
I think he's going to be viewed as one of the great all-time college quarterbacks. I mean, there have been plenty of guys who were incredible college quarterbacks who didn't necessarily pan out in the NFL. There's a hat behind me on my screen. That's the 1996 Heisman team hat that went to everybody who was a teammate of Danny Werfel. Danny Werfel is one of the greatest college quarterbacks who ever played. The only thing we remember of him in the NFL is he's playing for the Saints and he gets hit so hard that his helmet spins around on him. But that doesn't take away the fact that he was an all-time great college quarterback, and that is what Stetson Bennett will be forever. But I will say, I think prior to this season for like the hardcore college football fans, and then prior to Saturday for the casual college football fan, people were like, oh, he's fine, but they just need a replacement level quarterback because they have all that talent around him. I think you saw he made a lot of plays in that game that I'm not sure a lot of other quarterbacks make. And I think you realize now he's pretty special.
He's Andy Staples. He covers college football for The Athletic. What are you hearing with the transfer portal?
It's slowed down a little bit now because you had the open window in December and everybody started moving. The most recent news is that Grayson McCall, the Coastal Carolina quarterback, is headed back to Coastal Carolina. He had looked around at some schools and he's going to wind up staying for that final year at Coastal Carolina, which we've now seen 3 Group of 5 quarterbacks do that, where they've looked around and then wound up staying at the Group of 5 school. You're going to see one today in the Cotton Bowl, Michael Pratt at Tulane, and then Austin Reed at Western Kentucky was the second leading passer in the country this year. He looked around. I think Louisville was really in it when Jeff Brom got the job, but he ended up deciding to stay at Western Kentucky. So, yeah, for everybody who said it's just going to make these teams a farm system, that's not necessarily the case. You're seeing some guys make choices for different reasons.
I wonder about Ohio State's quarterbacking situation, losing C.J. Stroud, and you have a wide receiver who's probably a top 5 pick in the NFL, Marvin Harrison.
Yep.
Okay. Could you see Marvin Harrison looking at the transfer portal?
I could. You mean if he wanted to play with, say,
USC?
Caleb Williams?
Yes.
I could see that. I could see you get the same text from the same people I do. But I don't know if that's the case. I mean, here's the thing. Ohio State is still stacking 5-star quarterbacks on their roster. You know, they've got Devin Brown from Utah. We'll see who winds up winning that job. But remember, Marvin Harrison's been watching these guys play. So he knows if they can play or not already. So I'll be curious to see what he does.
But he really knows that Caleb Williams can play.
Oh, absolutely. But it's hard to imagine somebody leaving Ohio State for USC. But that would be interesting if it happened. And I'll tell you why, because the assumption is that the rich just get richer in this situation. That would kind of be a little Robin Hood action. I mean, USC's not poor by any stretch, but they are poorer than Ohio State in this scenario. And
wait a minute. They just took the coach and the quarterback from Oklahoma. This isn't Little Red Riding Hood here.
Did they take an elite defense?
No,
they sure didn't seem like they did.
They did forget about that.
So Ohio State.
Lincoln Riley's not known for being a defensive genius here.
I am aware of that. But if you're deciding who to play for next year, well, I would think about the fact that you need some first rounders on the other side of the ball too. Ohio State still has those. USC, we don't know if they're going to have those.
Yeah, but you're always throwing the football because you got to throw the football because your defense isn't very good.
That's exactly right. Well, and that's probably what Jordan Addison was saying. You know, Jordan Addison is at Pitt last year. He wins the Biletnikoff. His offensive coordinator leaves. His receivers coach leaves, and his first round quarterback's gone. And he goes through spring practice. He's like, well, this isn't going to be the same thing. Why don't I catch passes from Caleb Williams?
Yeah. I'll leave you with this. If you had to bet on Harbaugh, his future. I know that you're already hearing Broncos interested in Harbaugh. Yep. Harbaugh has flirted with this. The Vikings last year. Jim Harbaugh, you get back to the Final Four. What do you think he is, what his future is?
It's interesting because I was on my podcast last week and I said, could it have been that he was flirting with the Vikings just because the Vikings were a great situation? You have Kirk Cousins, you have Justin Jefferson, and as you've seen now, yesterday notwithstanding, they've had a very good season. And so maybe he was looking at it and saying, if I'm going to go back to the NFL, I want it to be in a good situation. And then I get texts from people who know things the following week going, oh, no. He would take one of the jobs available now. And I'm like, are you really sure? Because like the Colts job, the Broncos job, those jobs are pretty bad right now. Those don't look like they're a whole lot of fun. So if he really wants to go to the NFL and he'd take one of those jobs, I think you're better off staying at Michigan because what he's built at Michigan, being able to beat Ohio State 2 years in a row, go to the playoff 2 years in a row, the fact that they really seem to have solved how the transfer portal works, they've made the transfer portal a net positive every year for them. I think he's got something special going there. I think it'd be crazy to take a bad NFL job, but if he really wants to be back in the NFL and they're offering, I would get it, but I don't think he should leave. I think he's got potentially a national title season brewing in there somewhere at Michigan.
Yeah, the thing I wondered about when I'm watching them is they do run the football. They didn't run the football very well against TCU. They lacked explosive players.
Yeah.
And
that's the next thing is
back.
Explosive guys on the outside.
But, get a great tight end or get a great wide receiver. That's what has always surprised me with Harbaugh, that being a former quarterback, not having those dynamic players.
Well, I think you saw with Alabama this year that those players are hard to find. They don't grow on trees. And like Alabama had one or two, or in one case, one year they had four of them, incredible receivers every year. And you saw what happened when they had just above average receivers this year. It was a very different season for them. So those special guys are hard to find. Ohio State has Brian Hartline, who's maybe the best receivers coach in the country, one of the best recruiters of receivers in the country. And that's why they've always got, whether it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, they had Jamison Williams before Alabama did. They have Emeka Buka, they have Marvin Harrison Jr. They're stockpiling them.
Yeah.
So it's hard to crack into that when there are only so many of those humans walking around.
Great stuff as always, Andy. Thank you. Happy New Year. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Dan.
That's Andy Staples, covers college football for The Athletic.